June 18, 1815. The fate of Europe is about to be decided in a single day. On the fields near the small village of Waterloo, the armies of Napoleon Bonaparte, the French military genius, face off against the combined forces of Britain, Prussia, and their allies. This is the Battle of Waterloo, one of the most famous and significant military engagements in history. But how did it all come to this? And why did this one battle change the course of European history forever? The rise and fall of Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte, once the Emperor of France, had dominated Europe for over a decade with his military conquests and political reforms. His ambitions to expand French influence led to wars across the continent, known as the Napoleonic Wars. But after a disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 and defeats by coalitions of European powers, Napoleon was forced to abdicate in 1814. He was exiled to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. However, Napoleon wasn't content to remain in exile. In March 1815, he escaped from Elba and returned to France, rallying his former supporters and soldiers. Within days, he had regained control of France, forcing King Louis XV to flee. This period of his return to power is known as the 100 Days. But the European powers, including Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, were determined to stop Napoleon once and for all. They quickly formed a coalition, and their armies began to gather, ready to face the French emperor in battle. The build-up to Waterloo. Napoleon knew that his only chance of survival was to strike fast before the coalition forces could unite. He marched his army into what is now Belgium, aiming to divide and conquer the coalition armies led by the Duke of Wellington from Britain and General Blücher from Prussia. On June 16, 2 days before the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon won a victory at the Battle of Ligny against the Prussians. However, the Prussian army managed to retreat and regroup rather than being destroyed. Meanwhile, the British army, commanded by the Duke of Wellington, took a defensive position near the village of Waterloo, waiting for the Prussians to rejoin them. The battle unfolds. On the morning of June 18, 1815, the French and British armies faced each other across a muddy battlefield. Napoleon had around 72,000 troops, while Wellington commanded around 68,000, with another 50,000 Prussian soldiers marching to join him. The battle began with a French attack on the British center, but Wellington's forces held firm. Throughout the day, the French launched multiple assaults, including a massive cavalry charge, but the British defenses were strong. Wellington had chosen his position carefully, placing his troops on the reverse slopes of a ridge, which helped shield them from French artillery fire. As the day wore on, Napoleon grew increasingly frustrated. He launched his elite Imperial Guard, the most feared soldiers in Europe, in a final attempt to break through Wellington's lines. But in a stunning moment, the British held their ground and repelled the Imperial Guard, something that had never been done before. At this critical moment, the Prussian army, under General Blücher, arrived on the battlefield. The fresh Prussian troops struck Napoleon's right flank, and the French lines began to crumble. With the combined forces of Britain and Prussia bearing down on them, the French army collapsed into retreat. The aftermath and significance. The Battle of Waterloo marked the definitive end of Napoleon's rule. His army was shattered, and just days later, he abdicated once again, this time for good. Napoleon was captured and exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would live out the rest of his life until his death in 1821. The battle had far-reaching consequences. It ended over 2 decades of war in Europe and brought an end to the Napoleonic era. The Congress of Vienna, which had been working to redraw the map of Europe since Napoleon's first defeat in 1814, now had the opportunity to solidify a new balance of power. Europe would remain relatively peaceful for the next century, with no major continent-wide conflicts until World War I. Legacy of Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a turning point in world history. It ended Napoleon's dreams of a European empire and ushered in a new era of diplomacy and balance of power. For the British, Waterloo became a symbol of national pride, while for the French, it marked the tragic downfall of one of their greatest leaders. To this day, the battle is remembered as one of the most famous military engagements of all time, with its lessons on leadership, strategy, and the unpredictability of war studied by military historians and enthusiasts around the world. The name Waterloo has become synonymous with ultimate defeat, a fitting end to one of the most dramatic careers in history.